The warning klaxons blared across the USN Defiance's bridge, their shrill wails cutting through the tense silence. Captain Ryan Blake's knuckles whitened around the armrests of his command chair. As the main display flickered to life, the stars vanished, replaced by a nightmare unfolding in real time. "Report," Blake growled, his voice barely audible over the alarms. Lieutenant Chen's fingers flew across her console. "Long-range scanners confirm, sir. It is the Vorak, multiple capital-class signatures, emerging from warp at the edge of the Proxima Colony's defense perimeter." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew what Vorak sickle ships meant. Blake watched the tactical overlay paint crimson markers across the holographic display. Dozens, then hundreds, until the entire screen burned red. "Put Colony Command on screen," Blake ordered. The image of Proxima Governor Hale flickered into view, her face streaked with sweat. Behind her, emergency lights painted the bunker walls blood red. "Captain Blake, we're receiving no response to Hale's. Their forward elements just wiped out our orbital platforms like they were target practice." Before Blake could respond, the transmission dissolved into static. The main display shifted again, showing the Vorak Armada in all its terrible glory. Their ships moved like a school of predatory fish, black hulls swallowing the light as they descended upon the colony. "Sir," Ensign Rivera called from comms, "we're picking up a system-wide broadcast." It is the Vorak." Blake nodded. "Put it through." The bridge screens filled with the image of High Overlord Krustik. The Vorak leader's chitinous plates gleamed under the harsh lights of his command throne, his four segmented arms folded in casual arrogance. When he spoke, his voice emerged as a guttural growl from the translation systems. "People of the Terran colonies," Krustik began, his vertical pupils dilating with amusement. "The Vorak Empire claims these worlds by right of conquest. Your species has been assessed and classified as a herd species, weak, docile, and suitable only for labor or sustenance." A collective breath caught in the bridge crew's throats. Blake felt his stomach turn to ice. "Resistance is..." Krustik's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. "Amusing, but ultimately futile. You will surrender within one standard cycle or face extermination." The transmission cut abruptly. For 3 heartbeats, no one on the Defiance's bridge moved or spoke. "Chen," Blake finally said, his voice dangerously calm. "Status of the Proxima Colony." The lieutenant swallowed hard. "Last sensor readings show Vorak landing craft touching down in all major population centers. Our orbital defense grid is gone, sir. Wiped out in the first salvo." Blake turned to his tactical officer. "Options, Commander Hale?" The grizzled veteran shook his head. "Against that many capital ships? Even if we mobilized every ship in the sector, we'd be outgunned 20-1. Their shielding technology is generations ahead of ours." A new alert chimed on Rivera's console. "Captain, we're receiving distress signals from the outer settlements. The Vorak are, they're rounding people up, loading them onto transports." Blake's fist came down on his armrest. "Helm, plot and intercept course. Maximum burn." Hale grabbed his shoulder. "Ryan, think about this: one cruiser against their entire harvest fleet. It is suicide." Blake met his friend's gaze. "Then we make it count. Rivera, open a channel to Earth Command." The main screen resolved into the grim face of Admiral Singh in the lunar command bunker. "We see it, Defiance. The same pattern is repeating across 6 colonies. They hit us everywhere at once." "Orders, sir?" Blake asked. Though he already knew the answer, Singh's jaw tightened. "Fall back to the Sol defense perimeter. Earth Command is recalling all frontier forces. We need to regroup." Blake opened his mouth to protest when the Defiant shuddered violently. Warning lights flared across every station. "Multiple contacts," Chen shouted. "Vorak Hunter, killers just warped in behind us." The main display showed 3 dagger-shaped vessels materializing off their stern, their organic-looking hulls pulsing with sickly green energy. "Evasive maneuvers," Blake barked. All hands, battle stations. The Defiance lurched as the first plasma volley streaked past their bow. The Vorak ships moved with terrifying precision, herding the human cruiser like wolves circling prey. Shields at Faye, Hale reported. They're not even trying to kill us, just corralling us. Blake watched the tactical display with growing dread. The hunter-killers were driving them away from Proxima, away from the colonists being rounded up like livestock. "Captain," Rivera said, voice trembling, "we're receiving a new transmission, audio only." A hissing laugh filled the bridge before words formed. "Run, little human. Run back to your herd. We will find you all soon enough." The channel died with a burst of static. Blake looked at his crew, at Chen's white-knuckled grip on her console, at Hale's grim expression, at the young ensigns trying not to panic. "Helm," Blake said quietly. "Set course for Sol, maximum warp." As the Defiance turned away from Proxima, Blake watched the colony's last transmission on his private screen. The footage showed Vorak warriors striding through the streets, their chitinous armor impervious to small arms fire. Humans were being herded into pens, their faces blank with shock. One image burned itself into Blake's memory, a Vorak warrior casually backhanding a child who'd tried to run, sending the small body tumbling across the pavement like a broken doll. The screen went dark. Somewhere behind him, Blake heard someone retching. His own hands shook, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. "Rivera," he said, his voice like steel. "Encrypt this message for Earth Command. Tell them the Vorak just made the biggest mistake in galactic history." The ensign looked up, eyes red, rimmed. "What message, sir?" Blake turned to face the retreating stars, his reflection ghostly against the viewport. "Tell them humanity remembers what happens when you corner an animal." His fingers curled into fists. "And we're about to show the galaxy why that is a bad idea." The crystalline chambers of the Galactic Federation shimmered under the light of 1,000 artificial stars. Delegates from a dozen species lounged on their floating perches, their varied forms casting strange shadows across the polished floor. The humans stood at the center, alone on the speaking platform. Their simple grey uniforms a stark contrast to the vibrant silks and gleaming exoskeletons of the assembled dignitaries. Lisa Hayes adjusted the collar of her jacket, her fingers brushing against the small earthpin fastened there. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet, probably the pheromones the Zephyrians used to mark their territory. She could feel the weight of alien eyes on her, some curious, most dismissive. "Ambassador Hayes," rumbled the deep voice of High Arbiter Vexlorn, his forearms folded across his carapace. "The Federation has reviewed your petition for military aid against the Vorak incursion. The vote was unanimous." A hologram flickered to life above the central dais, displaying images of human colonies burning. Vorak harvest, ships loomed over cities, their sickle-shaped silhouettes blotting out the sun. Another image showed humans in chains, their heads bowed as Vorak overseers herded them into pens. The Zephyrian ambassador, a lithe figure with iridescent scales, let out a musical laugh. "Your warriors lack claws, venom, or even exoskeletons," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "What can you do, bleed for us?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. A Sorelian delegate, their floating orbs pulsing with amusement, added, "The Vorak are apex predators. You are prey, accept your place." Lisa's jaw tightened. She had expected this, they all had. But hearing the words still burned. Captain Ryan Blake, standing beside her in full dress uniform, shifted slightly. His face was unreadable, but she could see the fire in his eyes. "Ambassador," Blake said, his voice low but carrying. "You're making a mistake." The chamber erupted in laughter. A Vorak observer, lurking at the edges, let out a guttural chuckle. "Oh, this is rich. The Softkin thinks it can threaten us." Lisa held up a hand, silencing Blake before he could retort. She stepped forward, her boots clicking against the polished floor. "You misunderstand," she said, her voice calm. "We're not asking for your pity, we're warning you." More laughter. The Zeperian waved a dismissive hand. Warning us of what? Your primitive railguns, your fragile ships. Lisa didn't blink. You think strength is only teeth and claws. You've never seen what happens when humans are cornered. The High Arbiter leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over her. In our theatrics, the Federation will not waste resources on a lost cause. The Vorak have claimed your outer colonies. Soon, they will claim Earth. This is inevitable. Blake's hand twitched toward the sidearm at his hip, but Lisa caught his wrist. She didn't need to look at him to know what he was thinking. Then you leave us no choice, she said, turning to face the assembled delegates. We will fight alone, and when the Vorak learn the price of hunting us, you'll remember this moment. The Zeperian smirked. Brave words for a species about to be devoured. Lisa smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. You'll see, but by then, it'll be too late. The chamber fell silent. For the first time, the aliens seemed uneasy. There was something in her voice, something cold and certain, that gave even the Vorak pause. The High Arbiter cleared his throat. This session is concluded. The Federation's decision stands. As Lisa and Blake turned to leave, the holograms shifted again, showing the Vorak armada descending upon another human world. The delegates returned to their conversations, already dismissing the humans from their thoughts. Blake waited until they were outside the chamber before speaking. They're going to regret this. Lisa didn't look back. I know. Behind them, the doors sealed with a final echoing click. The galaxy had made its choice. Now it would learn the consequences. The encrypted transmission crackled across the void, bouncing between derelict convoys and abandoned mining stations. It carried no video, no voice, just a string of numbers repeating in perfect sequence. Every human ship within 100 light years heard it. Every human ship knew what it meant, deep in the asteroid belt, where no alien sensors bothered to look. The lights came on. Captain Elias Carter floated in the observation blister of the USN Forge, watching as the shipyard's skeletal frames shuddered to life. Red emergency lights bathed the cavernous interior in a bloody glow. Around him, engineers in patched, up exosuits scrambled across gantries, welding torches flaring as they fused, armor plating to the warship's ribs. Status, Carter barked into his headset. Railgun assembly at Fay, sir, replied Chief Engineer Vasquez. Her voice was hoarse from 3 days without sleep. We're cannibalizing the Titan's core for the capacitors. Another 12 hours. We don't have 12 hours, Carter snapped. A holoscreen flickered to life beside him, displaying the latest Vorak fleet movements. Red icons clustered around Mars like flies on rotting meat. They're already eating our home alive. A new voice cut through the chatter. Then well, make sure they choke on it. Carter turned to see Admiral Naomi Graves floating into the blister. Her uniform was singed at the shoulder, a souvenir from the Battle of Ceres. Behind her, a tactical hologram bloomed, showing schematics of a ship that shouldn't exist, the USN Atlantica. Graves tapped the hologram, zooming in on the monstrous railgun running along the dreadnought's spine. This is Operation Iron Dawn, she said quietly. Not a retreat, not a last stand, a counterattack. Carter's throat went dry. That's a planet, killer. No, Graves corrected. That's a message. In the bowels of the forge, Lieutenant Jake Riker tightened the last bolt on a thruster array. His hands were raw, his jumpsuit stiff with dried sweat. Around him, a dozen other mechanics worked in silence, their faces gaunt under the flickering work lights. Think teal work, muttered Corporal Diaz, wiping grease from her forehead. Riker didn't look up. Doesn't matter, we're out of time for pretty solutions. A klaxon wailed overhead. The entire station shuddered as magnetic clamps disengaged. Through the reinforced viewports, Riker saw the Atlantica, still half-cloaked in scaffolding, begin to drift free. Move it, someone shouted. She's going hot. Riker grabbed Diaz's arm and yanked her behind a blast shield, just as the Atlanticus engines flared to life. The glare burned his retinas even through the protective plating. When he dared to look again, the dreadnought was turning, its unfinished hull gleaming like a freshly sharpened knife. A comms officer's voice crackled over the shipyard's PA. All personnel brace for. The Atlantica vanished, not in a warp flash, not with a thunderous boom. It simply slid into the black, its new stealth system swallowing even the distortion of its drive. Diaz let out a shaky breath. Holy hell, they're really doing it. Riker stared at the empty space where the ship had been. Somewhere out there, the Vorak was still laughing, not for long. Admiral Graves stood on the Forge's command deck, watching the last of the Iron Fleet power up. 23 capital ships, 56 frigates. All of them jury-rigged, patched together from scrap and desperation. Signal from Earth Command. Comms reported. They're ordering us to fall back to the sole defense line. Graves didn't blink. Acknowledge receipt, then delete it. The officers exchanged glances. No one protested. Time to intercept? Graves asked. 6 hours until Mars orbit. Tactical replied. Vorak harvesters are still stripping the colonies. No sign they've detected us. Graves allowed herself a thin smile. The Vorak had sensors capable of tracking a single fighter across a star system, but they weren't looking for human ships. Why would they? Cattle didn't fight back. Set condition 1 throughout the fleet, Graves ordered, and patch me through to all channels. The holoscreen flickered, showing the faces of every captain in the Iron Fleet, haggard, furious, alive. Today, Graves said quietly, we teach the galaxy what happens when you corner a human. The USN Defiance answered first. Captain Blake's face was a mask of fresh burns. About damn time. One by one, the other ships chimed in. No speeches, no grand declarations, just a single word repeated like a mantra. Iron, iron, iron. Graves cut the feed. The deck hummed beneath her boots as the Forge's engines reached critical mass. All ships, she said. Jump, space tore open. The herd, the Vorak harvest, fleet hung in high orbit over Mars like a swarm of carrion birds. Their sickle-shaped ships pulsed with sickly green light, organic tendrils extending down to siphon the colony's resources. On the bridge of the USN Defiance, Captain Ryan Blake watched the feed from the Martian surface. Abandoned mining rigs, shattered domes, and the bodies left behind. His knuckles whitened around the armrests of his command chair. Status of the Atlantica, he asked, voice low. Lieutenant Chen didn't look up from her console. Still hidden in the asteroid belt, sir. Railgun at 90% charge. Blake exhaled. 90% wasn't perfect, but the Vorak weren't waiting. On the main display, a bloated Vorak tender detached from the fleet, its maw opening to swallow another cargo hauler. The ship's transponder flickered. USN Deliverance. A civilian vessel. Blake's jaw tightened. Signal the Vanguard and Resolute, he ordered. Tell them to hold position. We go in silent. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Silent meant no energy signatures, no plasma cannons, no warning. The Defiant slid through the void like a shadow, her thrusters firing in short, controlled bursts. The Vorak hadn't even bothered to deploy scouts. Why would they? Humans were prey. Target locked, whispered Ensign Rivera at tactical. The lead harvester. Kinetic rods loaded. Blake leaned forward. Fire. The Defiance shuddered as the railgun emplacements along her spine discharged. No bright beams, no crackling energy, just 6 tungsten rods the size of city buses, hurled at a fraction of light speed. The first rod struck the Vorak harvester dead center. The alien ship didn't explode. It shattered, its chitinous hull peeling apart like rotten fruit. Atmosphere and fluids vented into space, carrying with them flailing, insectoid forms. The second rod missed. The third punched through another ship's spine, snapping it in half. Vorak comms erupted in panicked screeches, untranslated by the Defiance's systems. Blake didn't need a translator to understand. All ships, he snapped. Full barrage, give them nothing to regroup on. Across the Martian orbit, human warships decloaked. Not just the Vanguard and Resolute, but a dozen others. Patrol cutters, retrofitted freighters, even the old Titan's Fury, her railguns jury-rigged but deadly. The sky above Mars became a storm of metal. A Vorak fighter spiraled past the Defiance's viewport, its wings sheared off by kinetic fire. Another tried to flee, only to be bisected by a rod from the Resolute. "They're breaking formation," Chen called out. Blake allowed himself a grim smile. "Open a channel to the Atlantica." Static hissed, then cleared. "Atlantica Actual, we read you," came the voice of Commander Elena Voss. "Elena," Blake said, "we've got them running. Time to remind the galaxy what we are." A pause, then railgun at 100%, firing in 10. The Atlantica's shot wasn't subtle. A streak of white, hot fury lanced across the void, so bright it left afterimages on the Defiance's screens. It struck the Vorak command carrier, a monstrous thing, 5 kilometers long, and kept going. The carrier didn't just die, it disintegrated, vaporized down to its core. For a heartbeat, the battlefield fell silent. Then the Vorak comms exploded. Not with orders, not with threats, with screams. Blake keyed the fleet-wide channel. His voice carried across every human ship, every surviving Martian outpost, and though he didn't know it yet, every listening post in the Galactic Federation. "You called us cattle," he said. "Now meet the butchers." The jump alarm screamed through the US in defiance as the fleet tore through warp space. Captain Ryan Blake gripped the command console, his knuckles white. The display showed 1,000 blue dots, human ships, all converging on the Centauri system. 30 seconds to emergence, called Lieutenant Cho. Her fingers danced across the tactical display, bringing the Defiance's railgun batteries online. Blake exhaled. "All ships, combat readiness. Remember, they think we're prey. Let's show them what prey does when it bites back." The stars blurred, then snapped back into focus. The Centauri system stretched before them, and so did the Vorak fleet. Dozens of sickle-shaped harvesters orbited the gas giant, their black hulls glinting in the distant sun. Organic tenders pulsed as they siphoned resources from the planet's rings. They hadn't even bothered to raise shields. "Enemy vessels detected," the AI intoned. "No active targeting systems. They're ignoring us." Blake smirked. Big mistake. The Atlantica emerged last, its massive frame dwarfing the other human ships. The prototype Dreadnought's railgun hummed to life, a low, ominous vibration that thrummed through every comm channel. "Atlantica to fleet," came Captain Voss' voice, cold and steady. "Primary target acquired, firing in 5. The Vorak finally noticed. Alarms blared across their fleet, their organic hulls rippling as they scrambled to turn too late. The Atlantica's railgun fired. A tungsten slug the size of a skyscraper tore through the void. It struck the lead Vorak dreadnought dead center. The impact didn't just pierce the ship. It vaporized half its mass in a flash of white, hot fury. The remaining hull split like rotten fruit, spilling molten debris into space. Silence filled the human comms. Then, chaos. "All ships, engage," Blake barked. The human fleet surged forward, railguns and missile batteries roaring to life. Kinetic rods shredded Vorak harvesters like paper. Explosions bloomed across the black, each one a silent scream of dying ships. The Vorak scrambled, their transmissions frantic. They fight like cornered animals. One shrieked over open channels. "Where are their energy signatures?" another demanded. "They're using projectiles." Blake grinned. "That's right, old school." The Defiance locked onto a fleeing harvester. "Fire at will," Blake ordered. The railgun thundered. The harvester's spine snapped, its hull folding like wet cardboard. "Another one down," Cho reported. "Good. Keep hitting them. They don't get to run." Across the battlefield, the Vorak were learning fast. Their organic ships twisted, trying to evade, but human targeting systems were relentless. The Atlantica fired again, this time punching clean through 2 ships in a single shot. "Captain," comms officer Hale shouted. "We're picking up a Vorak distress signal. They're calling for reinforcements." Blake leaned forward. "Let them. I want every ship in their empire to hear this." He opened a fleet. "Wide channel. Vorak fleet," he said, his voice cutting through the static. "This is Captain Ryan Blake of the United Earth Starship Defiance. You came to our worlds thinking we were weak. You called us cattle." He paused, watching another harvester explode. "Now meet the butchers." The transmission ended. The Vorak didn't respond. They didn't need to. Their ships burned. The human fleet advanced. And for the first time in galactic history, the hunters became the hunted. The crystalline chambers of the Galactic Federation had never known such chaos. Holographic displays flickered wildly, casting jagged blue light across the floating perches where delegates from a dozen species clutched their appendages in panic. The air vibrated with overlapping translation frequencies as the footage played on loop. Vorak harvest ships breaking apart in silent explosions, their organic hulls rupturing like overripe fruit under human kinetic bombardment. Lisa Hayes stood at the center of it all, her hands clasped behind her back. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply watched as the Zephyrian ambassador's frills flushed from crimson to sickly yellow, his earlier mockery replaced by something far more satisfying. "Fear, this is unacceptable." The Zephyrian's voice crackled through the translation matrix. His 4 eyes darted between the displays, his clawed hands gripping the edge of his perch. "Your species was supposed to be compliant, docile. These are war crimes." Lisa tilted her head. "War crimes?" Her voice was soft, almost conversational. "That's interesting, because according to Federation records, war crimes only apply to recognized military species. And last I checked, we were classified as livestock." A hush fell over the chamber. The Ceralian delegate, a floating orb of bioluminescent gel, pulsed nervously. "Ambassador Hayes, surely you understand our concern. The Vorak are a founding member of this council, their losses are their problem," Lisa interrupted. She tapped a command into her wrist display, and the holograms shifted. Now they showed the mining colonies, human men, women, and children dragged in chains by Vorak overseers, their bodies broken under whips and shock prods. "You watched this happen. You voted to ignore our petitions. You laughed when Krastik called us a herd species." She looked up, her gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates. "So tell me, honored representatives, why should we stop now?" The Thalassian ambassador, a serpentine creature draped over its perch, hissed through its gills. "You risk provoking the entire Vorak Empire. Their home fleet outnumbers yours 10-1. Lisa's lips twitched. "Funny. That's the same math the Vorak used when they attacked Mars." She tapped her wrist again. The displays changed once more, this time showing the wreckage of the Vorak forward fleet, twisted metal and frozen bodies drifting in the void. Turns out, numbers don't mean much when your enemy refuses to die politely. A new voice cut through the chamber, deep, resonant, and laced with static. It was High Overlord Krastik himself, his holographic form flickering into existence beside the central display. His chitinous plates were cracked, one of his 4 eyes reduced to a smoldering ruin. "Enough of this farce," he snarled. "The Federation will sanction humanity for these atrocities. Their colonies will burn. Their species will." Lisa didn't let him finish. She turned to face him fully, her posture relaxed, her voice calm. "Krastik, you made one mistake." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "You assumed we were afraid of you." The chamber froze. Even the ambient hum of the life support system seemed to quiet. Then the alarms started. Klaxons wailed as emergency protocols flooded the chamber with red light. The displays flickered, then resolved into a single image, a human fleet, hundreds of ships strong, emerging from warp at the edge of the Vorak home system. At their lead, the USN Atlantica, its planet, cracker railgun, glowing with pent-up energy. The Zephyrian ambassador recoiled. You can't. The Vorak homeworld is under Federation protection. Lisa didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Krastik's flickering hologram. We're not here for protection, she said softly. We're here for answers. She tapped her wrist one final time. The Atlantica's railgun flared. The feed cut to static silence. Then, slowly, the Cerellian delegate began to pulse, a rapid, erratic rhythm that translated roughly as terror. The Thalassian coiled tighter around its perch. The Zephyrian's frills had gone completely white. Lisa turned back to them, her expression unreadable. You wanted to see what humans could do, she said. Now you have. She straightened her jacket. The question is, what are you going to do about it? No one answered. The chamber's main display flickered back to life. It showed the Vorak homeworld, its skies filled with human warships. No demands, no transmissions, just silence, and the galaxy held its breath. The Vorak homeworld hung in space like a rotten fruit, its once proud orbital defenses now drifting debris. The USN Atlantica led the Armada, its planet, cracker railgun humming with barely restrained power. Captain Ryan Blake stood on the bridge, his reflection staring back from the darkened view screen. Behind him, the crew worked in silence. No cheers, no celebrations, just the quiet hum of systems and the occasional beep of scanners. On the surface, billions of Vorak waited. Their high overlords had fled, their fleets were ash, and now their home trembled beneath the shadow of human warships. Blake tapped his comm. Open, a channel, all frequencies, galactic broadcast. The comm officer nodded. Live in 321. Blake didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. High Overlord Krastik, this is Captain Ryan Blake of the United Earth Stellar Navy. You declared us cattle. You thought we would run. You were wrong. He paused, letting the silence stretch across the stars. We do not negotiate with slavers. We do not bargain with butchers. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. After that, we stop asking. The channel cut on the bridge of the Defiance. Lieutenant Chen exhaled sharply. Think they'll take the offer. Blake didn't look away from the screen. No, in the Galactic Federation's crystalline chambers, panic had replaced arrogance. The Zephyrian ambassador's frills flared crimson with distress. As holograms flickered above the central dais, human warships, dozens of them, hanging motionless above Vorak Prime. The Vorak delegation had gone silent, their once proud mandibles now clamped shut. Lisa Hayes stood at the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She simply watched as the ambassadors of a dozen species shifted uncomfortably in their perches. The Zephyrian was the first to break. This is excessive. The Vorak are defeated. There is no need for further. Lisa cut him off. You didn't say that when they were burning our colonies. You didn't say that when they dragged our people into cages. She took a single step forward, and the chamber seemed to shrink around her. You watched. You laughed. Now you have the privilege of watching this. A new hologram flickered to life. The Atlantica's railgun powering up, its magnetic coils glowing white-hot. On Vorak Prime, the hour came and went. No surrender. Blake didn't hesitate. Fire. The Atlantica's railgun discharged with a soundless roar, the projectile crossing the distance between ship and planet in less than a second. It struck the Vorak capital like the fist of an angry god, the impact sending a shockwave visible from orbit. Buildings crumbled. Towers fell. The sky itself seemed to scream. The human fleet didn't move. They didn't bombard. They didn't invade. They just waited. A second hour passed. Then, at last, a transmission crackled across the void. It was weak, broken. The voice of a broken people. Vorak Prime surrenders. Blake leaned back in his chair. Acknowledged. The Galactic Federation's records were updated that same cycle. A single line, etched into their archives for all eternity. Humanity, Classification: Predator. And the galaxy learned to fear the herd.